Well, after much anticipation, today the Coalition released the costings for their ambitious nuclear energy plans. They're promising Australians a permanent, stable, reliable electricity supply for a quarter of the cost of a part-time, made-in-China, weather-dependent, hackable toys. If the modelling is right, well, there's no comparison. Frontier Economics reckon the Coalition's plan to reach net zero will cost $264 billion less than Labor's. But as they say, the devil is in the detail, and it is Friday the 13th. So joining me now to go through today's costings is the Director of Energy Research at the Centre for Independent Studies, Aidan Morrison. Aidan, thanks for joining me tonight. First off, we've been waiting a long time for the Coalition to release their costings. We finally have them. What were your initial impressions from their presentation today?
It looks like a reasonable estimation of the impact that nuclear energy is going to have on the grid. It's been established by lots of other studies overseas that when you add some significant amount of reliable, firm, clean power, that reduces the cost of decarbonising quite substantially. And that's what we've found in this work done today by Frontier Economics. It still does look like a reasonably ambitious program to be able to get to first power in 2036. That means the Coalition will have to get their skates on. There's not a lot of room for them to make any big mistakes. But it certainly seems a lot more plausible than the current government's plan of adding another 88 gigawatts of renewable energy in the next 5 years, which is absolutely not going to happen. So both parties have ambitious plans, but I think that this one does look reasonably credible, and it looks like it will lead to a lower cost system overall in the long run.
Talk to me just quickly about Frontier Economics, because obviously the costings are going to be disputed. How reputable are they? And they've done work for the government as well, haven't they?
Yes, they do work for the government. They were actually one of the participants that were named in the recent review of the Integrated System Plan, where the government reached out to selected trusted parties to do a review of the Integrated System Plan. So they're very well established, really a premier sort of analysis group, and they've done this kind of very detailed, very expensive modelling, the full system modelling that GenCost's own report suggests is required to get a clearer picture. GenCost acknowledges that their own levelised cost of energy analysis is not a sufficient substitute for this kind of detailed work. So Frontier is a credible outfit. They're used regularly by many industry players in the government, and it looks like they've put some real elbow grease into this one. It's quite a substantial piece of work now that we've finally got it.
Now, you mentioned another issue that will be hotly debated, and that's the time frame. As you said, today's plan assumes nuclear power will be operational by 2036. You said that is realistic, though it leaves little margin for error. The government, of course, are going to dispute this and say it's going to take too long. I think Jason Clare today said it's going to take 20 years, which is very different to 2036. How do we know who's right on that particular argument?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. There's lots of different sources here. I tend to go by the IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency's milestones report. It's a set of basic steps and principles for embarking nations that don't yet have nuclear energy on how to get there. And their recommendation from first policy decision to delivering electrons in the grid is you need to allow 10 to 15 years. I think that is plausible, and I think that's the best sort of world standard sort of to aim for. So obviously the Coalition is aiming for the bottom end of that range. But as we heard at the Nuclear Energy Inquiry conducted by Parliament yesterday from Helen Cook, Australia has a number of serious advantages, including quite a well set up regulatory framework for our medical research reactor. We do actually have serious nuclear energy skills and regulatory systems. We're signatories to most of the major treaties. So we're not starting from nearly as much of a cold start as plenty other countries are. So it can always go wrong. Mistakes can be made. It does not mean that we're going to sail home and do this very easily, but there is a plausible path, I believe, if the government does, or if the opposition, should they form government, gets their skates on, gets the support of at least one major state government, and doesn't make any bad mistakes and follows the very best practice from international recommendations on how to get nuclear built.
Now, of course, all of this is about reaching net zero by 2050, which countries around the world are committed to. The nuclear plan, does that make it more difficult? Does it make it easier? I think nuclear will comprise 38% of the energy mix, with renewables and gas making up the rest. What chance the government will hit its net zero target by 2050 under this plan?
Look, under this plan, I think it's actually much more credible than the alternative plan to hit net zero by 2050. I'd just like to point out that the current plan we have, the integrated system plan, doesn't incorporate any of the carbon emissions that are used to actually make the solar panels and make the pylons and the turbine blades for wind turbines and make all the steel for transmission. It only looks at what's actually emitted right here. So all the embodied carbon in those manufactured goods that we import from China is just not considered. So if we're really true global players in considering how to decarbonise the whole global economy, actually using nuclear is a much, much better and easier way to go, because we're not simply exporting any fraction of our emissions to China. So to get to there by 2050, I think this is actually a much more plausible plan. Still ambitious, actually, but the coalition's plan finishes with a lower total carbon output than that of the integrated system plan. It does, of course, mean we emit some more carbon in the interim years, and so there'll be higher emissions for the next 15 years or so. That's undisputed, of course. But for the longer term goals, I think it looks very plausible.
All right, one more question before I let you go. And of course, this is the one that everybody at home wants to know. What will this plan do to my power bills? Now, the coalition today didn't make any specific announcements about power bills. It was more just the cost overall is going to be less. Therefore, in time, power bills will come down. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, that's right. The overall system cost is what they've mapped out here today, and I think that credibly shows that it can be lower, but there's a lot of other things that can go wrong. And also the big one that I'd point out at the moment is that the federal government is doing their best to rush as many of the mega projects through right now before the next election, and also underwriting massive amounts of renewable energy. So the real trick will be to see whether the opposition, should they win government, can be very quick about actually stopping all the excessive investments in unneeded overbuild, all the unneeded, unnecessary rush transmission construction, etc., that drive up costs, because they're actually being reproved right at the moment. So it will take more hard work to realise the benefits of aiming for a lower cost system, because we've already set a few things in motion that are going to try to target us towards this extremely expensive renewables-only plan. So I do hope that it pushes prices down. I think that is very plausible in the medium to long term. However, they will have to stop the overbuild of things like excessive transmission and subsidising unnecessary renewables that the system won't need at the pace they're currently being rolled out.
Well, the scene has certainly been set for the next federal election. This debate will continue over the next few months, but we appreciate you, Aidan Morrison, giving your insights tonight. Thank you.